that there is a wave of Calvinist resurgence taking place, which has led many cage-stage Calvinists, he calls them extremists, to reduce the complexity of Reformed thinking to only a few points, usually those relating to soteriology. I'm thinking of several churches in our area and guys like John MacArthur. Hello, my name is Jared Hiebert, and this is the Here I Sit podcast. Today we are doing a book review. It is book number 3 on the topic of Calvinism, which we've reviewed in this space and on my blogs, which you can again find on our church's website, covreformedchurch.org, covreformedchurch.org. It's written by Kenneth Stewart, Emeritus Professor of Theological Studies at Covenant College. The book is called 10 Myths About Calvinism, Recovering the Breadth of the Reformed Tradition. His book is written as a corrective, which the title suggests, but also furthers the discussion regarding the true nature of Reformed theology. In his work, Stewart seeks to set the record straight regarding the belief, history, icons, and contemporary emphasis of Calvinism, or the Reformed tradition. He prefers, as do I, that latter term. Stewart writes his book with Calvinists in mind, yet he hopes that it will also be a valuable work for those who have, quote, consciously decided that the Calvinist position is not for them, end quote. To this end, Stewart divides his book into 2 parts. The first part articulates 4 myths which are perpetuated by Calvinists, which they should not perpetuate. And the second part contains 6 myths that non-Calvinists circulate about Calvinism, which are inaccurate. The author argues that each of these are mischaracterizations of the Reformed tradition that need to be corrected in order to give this theology its proper due. His desire is to burn away the dross that has accumulated on the gold of Reformed theology on account of its going mainstream. As I mentioned, he begins his work in part 1 by looking at 4 myths Calvinists should not be circulating, and then in parenthesis, but are. Here are his 4 myths. Myth number 1. One man, that being John Calvin, and one city, that being Geneva, are determinative. Myth number 2. Calvin's view of predestination must be ours. Myth number 3. Tulip is the yardstick of the truly Reformed. And myth number 4. Calvinists take a dim view of revival and awakening. Part 2, as I mentioned, deals with 6 myths non-Calvinists should not be circulating, again in parentheses, but are. The myths are as followed. Calvinism is largely anti-missionary. Calvinism promotes antinomianism. Calvinism leads to theocracy. Calvinism undermines the creative arts. Calvinism resists gender equity. Calvinism has fostered racial inequality. Coming in at around 300 pages, there's too much in this work to discuss in a short review, so I'll keep my comments focused mainly on part 1 and then the final chapter. I really appreciated the fact that Stewart was willing to take some corrective shots at some who call themselves Reformed, but really aren't. Throughout this section, he calls on Calvinists to be more theologically aware and more biblically discerning. Many Reformed people have a name it and claim it attitude towards Reformed thinking that doesn't hold up to serious biblical and historical study. They name something within the Reformed tradition that they like as their own. Then, because they've named something, they claim to be Reformed to any and all who will listen. Stewart recognizes that there was, remember he's writing almost 15 years ago in 2011, although I think it's still happening somewhat, that there is a wave of Calvinist resurgence taking place, which has led many cage-stage Calvinists, he calls them extremists, to reduce the complexity of Reformed thinking to only a few points, usually those relating to soteriology. I'm thinking of several churches in our area and guys like John MacArthur. As an example of the kinds of correctives he articulates throughout this section, Stewart warns that there are surely many enthusiastic converts among the, quote, young, restless, and reformed who will be shocked to hear that, quote, tulip cannot be allowed to function as a creed, end quote, and that Calvinism, in fact, does not have only 5 points. According to Stewart, Reformed theologians past and present have wrongly turned this 5-point tulip into a, quote, Procrustean formula, end quote, an inflexible yardstick of belief. In doing so, they demonstrate themselves to be Reformed adjacent only. In the final chapter, Stewart calls out some of the modern Reformed people who are like Melchizedek. They appear without genealogy. That is, they lack historical grounding, and they promote a dehistoricized form of Reformed theology that often does not stand within the tradition that it claims to be purporting. He writes that those new Calvinists need to recognize that they stand in succession to and dependency on early movements, and thus they need to demonstrate that they are either not part of this tradition and come with new terminology to articulate their beliefs, or to return to the historical foundations of the Reformed tradition. 10 Myths of Calvinism is a valuable resource for anyone looking to better understand Calvinism or to clear up misconceptions about the Reformed tradition. This book was written almost 15 years ago, yet I find myself returning to it to refresh my memory regarding the true nature and boundaries of Reformed thought. For that reason, it is a valuable addition to any Reformed person's library. That's all for now. Until next time.